This video is presented by mybookie.ag and we are back after like a month without fights. I'm super hyped up like it's a pay-per-view coming up this weekend, and it's going to be headlined by Sean Strickland versus Nassourdine Imavov. And Sean Strickland ended 2022 and he's going to start 2023 and going up against a young fighter different than Jared Cannonier. This is a big, tall, lanky, young fighter, and he's really putting his status on the line. We also have other interesting fights and quite a bit of undefeated fighters. We have 5 total fighters who have not lost yet, and most of them are pretty young. The entire prelims, besides Priscilla Cachoeira and Sijara Eubanks, are young fighters that you probably have never heard of before, so it will be somewhat fun to see what the younger, up-and-coming talent is going to look like for the UFC. And every single fight besides the main event is 185 or below. Only the main event is going to be a light heavyweight fight. It's the first fight for Sean Strickland at 205. And because of all the young fighters, it was kind of difficult to pick the prospect of the night, but I believe that is going to go to Javid Basharat, who is 13-0, 27 years old, fighting out of Afghanistan, a well-rounded fighter who has really good grappling skills, and he's going up against another undefeated fighter. So I'm really curious to see how he performs, but there are other guys here that can also claim that. The fighter of the night, there really isn't any. I mean, people know Sean Strickland more than anybody else, but I'm not going to pick one because Nassourdine has a lot of promise as well, so I can't really pick one. The stake of the night, the fighter that is in hot waters, I would say is Sijara Eubanks. Sijara is 7-7. She's 1-3 in her last 4 fights. She just got finished in her last one, and her fights aren't necessarily that exciting, so if she goes out there and loses yet again to Priscilla Cachoeira, I don't know if she's going to be able to stick around in the UFC. The banger of the night, the most explosive fight, is easily going to go to Abdulrazak Alhassan versus Claudio Ribeiro. This fight is ending quick. These two guys have 18 first-round knockouts in between each other. Literally, every single one of Alhassan's wins is by first-round knockout. All 10 of them. And then Claudio has 8 first-round knockouts out of his 9 wins. There's going to be some slinging of heavy leather. Abdul has the speed advantage. He's a bit smaller, which is going to help him in that department, but he could get easily overpowered. I will have to say that as powerful that we know Alhassan is, Claudio's even more powerful than him. I think punch for punch, he hits harder, which is insane to think about. When Alhassan's going up against someone who's even bigger and stronger than he is, it's going to be tough to see him win that kind of thing. I mean, his speed advantage is going to be his main asset in the fight, where both guys are super wild. I mean, we're not talking about any technique here in their striking. This is going to be such a physical fight that can end in seconds. Another big thing going for Claudio is he's 3 inches taller and he has a 4-inch reach advantage, and he uses all of his reach into all of his punches. Then the fight of the night is going to go to Umar Nurmagomedov versus Raoni Barcelos. I also would like to say Punahele Serrano versus Roman Kopylov. That's a great fight as well, but I'm going to stick with Umar versus Barcelos. In my opinion, they're the 2 best fighters on the whole card. Skill-wise, technique-wise, I think they're 2 of the most complete fighters on the entire card. And to be honest, I don't think there's anybody really that close. Nassourdine is also a great fighter, but he doesn't touch these 2 in terms of technique. And it's crazy because Umar is number 15 in the bantamweight division, and Barcelos is not even ranked. It just tells you how deep that bantamweight division is, where the number 15 guy is better than the number 6 in middleweight. In fact, a guy who's ranked like number 21 in Tapology at least is even better than the number 6 guy in middleweight. But I can't wait to see how this one goes down, and we're going to start with that fight first. Umar Nurmagomedov versus Raoni Barcelos is your best fight on the whole card, and it's one you definitely don't want to miss. Even though Umar is fighting lower in the rankings, Barcelos is a veteran who's fought a lot of great guys, and he presents a lot of problems that Umar might run into. Barcelos has good knockout power, he's fast, he sets up combinations well, he's a decent wrestler, throws good kicks, good shot placement, especially with his uppercuts. And those uppercuts could be a problem for Umar to shoot in on if Barcelos is trying to time those. The biggest problem Umar might run into is that takedown defense. Barcelos has a 93% takedown defensive rate. He has been taken down 1 time in his entire UFC career, and that was his debut against Kurt Holobaugh. He fought Timur Valiev and Said Nurmagomedov, and neither of these guys could take him to the ground. Timur shot 6 times, all defended. Said shot twice, all defended. And it's funny because he has a win over a Nurmagomedov when he beat Said by a decision. If Umar could not get this fight to the ground, he could run into a lot of trouble, man. I don't see it really happening because Umar is such a better wrestler compared to everybody else that Barcelos has fought. It's a different level. So when you look at the lesser level wrestlers and compare them to Umar, it will not surprise me if he does sweep Barcelos off his feet. But the thing is, Umar has that Dagestani wrestling style. He'll shoot in on you, not necessarily to get you to the ground with that initial shot, but it's to create contact, and from there, he will chain wrestle to different positions, different angles, to break you down slowly to the ground and use the cage against you in order to trap you there. And that's when he gets the Dagestani handcuff. That's when he gets these dominant positions on you and lands ground and pound, softens you up enough to where you give up your neck or something, and then he will submit you. I think Barcelos is going to be extremely composed, at least compared to everybody else Umar has fought, and maybe not give up submissions to Umar, but it is a sure way that Umar can win this by a decision. I don't see him really getting too much off of his striking. I mean, he could catch Barcelos with some good kicks. Umar's biggest thing with the striking are his high kicks and thrust kicks to the body. He's a much better kicker than he is a puncher. His hands are a lot more wild, and he'll only throw them in the southpaw stance. I did put here that he is a switch fighter, but he's only a switch fighter because he will oftentimes throw his right kick mostly from orthodox. So as a southpaw, he's throwing everything. Besides that right kick, he throws more from the orthodox stance. And he'll do things like where he'll shift it to orthodox, use that switching of stances as a feint, and he'll thrust you to the body with his kick. Or you'll come up high with a question mark kick or something crazy like that. His kicks are super flexible, and he can honestly catch anybody in the world with those. So I wouldn't be surprised too much if Barcelos gets caught off guard by some of the kicks, but I do think he will be able to time those as the fight plays out. And I think the only thing he's going to run into that could be something he doesn't address, or at least he can't solve, are the takedowns. Umar doesn't necessarily need to get it to the ground either to win the fight. He could kind of go the Merab path to victory, how Merab beat Jose Aldo by holding him up against the fence. I could see Umar winning this fight through a very similar reason. As Barcelos, he's not exactly like Jose Aldo, but he does have a lot of similar mannerisms and techniques. Now, in place of Barcelos and him catching Umar, it can absolutely happen, but I think it's only going to take place inside of these counter shots or just sniping at him at the right moments. Trying to put up combinations on Umar is going to get him shot in on, and Umar's going to use those takedowns in order to drag out the fight. So more sniping and less combinations from Barcelos. But ultimately, I am going to go with Umar, and I'm going to go by a decision win through his wrestling, but I think this should be his toughest fight in his entire career. And then we go to the main event. Sean Strickland versus Nassourdine Imavov. If I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's going to be that fun. So we know how Sean Strickland fights, of course, but Nassourdine also doesn't have like a lot of output. He moves around a lot, and it's actually fun to watch his footwork and stuff, but it gets to a point where he barely throws anything. If only this guy threw more. If he committed more in fights, he would be a menace out there. There's great flow, good speed, power, everything, but he just doesn't do it as often. He's moving around a lot, and a lot of nothing is happening. And I think Sean Strickland is actually going to be the one that has more output, and he could even win this fight strictly off of the fact that Nassourdine is not throwing enough. And he's looking too much in order to snipe you, and especially counter you with the left hook. But the thing about Sean Strickland is, he doesn't give you a lot to counter. Everything about Strickland is a jab. From southpaw to orthodox, he's just pumping you in the face with jabs the entire time. He'll throw some leg kicks here and there, and it's funny because both these guys don't defend leg kicks at all. I would say Strickland is getting better at it, whereas Imavov is not. Imavov is just taking leg kicks for the fun of it. I don't even understand. He moves around a lot, he has that wide stance, so it's there for the opening, and I think Strickland has a lot of areas where he can attack successfully. He has the legs to attack whenever he wants, he can jab in the face almost whenever he wants. If Nassourdine ever gets into that range, Strickland's going to dominate that range with activity. And the main ways that Imavov was getting ahead in his fights was actually through his grappling and not necessarily his striking. Even though he never shoots in takedowns, so what does that tell you? He's winning fights because of his grappling, but he's not the one shooting takedowns. That means these guys are shooting takedowns on him, and he's catching them in submissions. He's taking top control way faster than they can, and you saw this in the Joaquin Buckley fight. You saw this against Edmund Shabazian, Ian Heinisch, etc. Like, all these guys shoot takedowns on him, and that's when he wins the fight. If Strickland shoots a takedown, I don't even know what to say anymore. Strickland should be able to punch his way to a victory here, specifically through his activity alone. His jab is excellent, and he's very hard to hit in general. Even Cannonier had a hard time hitting this guy. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I am going to go with Sean Strickland. I think he should be a bigger favorite than they're giving him, unless Nassourdine starts throwing more. If he starts throwing more, I can see him winning the fight. But if he doesn't, and Strickland has the more activity, I see Strickland winning the fight for sure. So I'm going to go with Sean Strickland winning a decision. I'll say 4 rounds out of the 5. And the fact that the fight's at 205 pounds, I think is going to favor Strickland, whereas Nassourdine was preparing himself for 185. So you might actually see Strickland being the bigger fighter in there. just like he should be the bigger favorite. And the fact that he's not is actually a great betting lines for anybody that wants to bet on Sean Strickland. You just have to go to mybookie.ag, where besides the main event, the odds are so crazy. I mean, we got a over -1,000 in Umar. That I don't agree with. Raoni Barcelos absolutely has a chance to win that. He has great takedown defense, and he's potentially a better striker than Umar with far more experience. I do think Umar should win the fight, but I don't see how it's even over a -300 for Umar. -1,000? It does not hurt to put something on Barcelos at all. And then we have a -833 with Mateusz Rebecki being a big favorite over Nick Fiore. I do think Rebecki should win, for sure. He's a great grappler, strong wrestler, very physical. And I don't know if Fiore is going to be able to stop those takedowns at all. He is potentially the better striker, or at least much cleaner with his striking. Rebecki looks like a fire hydrant out there. Not too flexible in anything, but just super aggressive. Then you have a -588 with Daniel Argueta, and he should absolutely win that fight. We have a couple -300s like Javid Basharat, who I do think should win the fight, and Alan Nascimento. Charles Johnson is a huge favorite, and out of these -300s, this is the one that could be an upset. Charles Johnson's takedown defense against Mohamed Mokayev was actually pretty solid, so because of that, it's going to give Jimmy Flick a bit of an issue, right? Jimmy Flick's a grappler through and through. He's not going to deal with Johnson on the feet most likely, and if Johnson could just stop the takedowns, I think it should be a relatively easy win for him. But if he does get taken to the ground, Jimmy Flick is all about his submissions and opportunities. He reminds me kind of like a Darren Elkins, Tim Elliott with his grappling. Not the most technical, but give him openings and he will take those and surprise everybody. He is super tough, durable, and can be very aggressive with his grappling. So I would say the fighters that are most likely going to win, I think Umar, Sean Strickland, and Dan Ige are my locks of the card. They're the fighters that I do think are going to win their fights. Now with underdogs, we have to know that they usually don't win, but the best underdogs with the highest chance of upsetting, number one is probably Sean Strickland. He's like the only one that I do think is going to win. And here's the thing, if you're going to go with Sean Strickland, I think the best strategy is to go with a decision because that's how he's usually going to win a fight. Ask yourself, do you really think that he's going to finish Nassourdine Imavov? Do you think he's going to knock him out or submit him? How do Sean Strickland fights usually go at middleweight? I mean, they are at 205, so maybe he has more power and surprises us. But a decision win for him is actually a +280. If that's the way he's most likely going to win the fight, instead of going with that small underdog line, you probably want to go with that +280 instead. Jimmy Flick has good odds on him. And then Raoni Barcelos, actually. Even though he's the biggest underdog on the whole card, I actually think after Sean Strickland, he has the best chance of winning as an underdog. The only thing about the Soriano and Kopylov fight is they're both strikers, and I know Soriano is definitely more dangerous, more powerful, very athletic, but he's so aggressive in a way where he can get countered. If he fights as smarter, he should win that fight, but the chances of him getting countered, I think, are way too large to be too confident in him. And with the Caitlin Vieira and Raquel Pennington fight, I do think it should be relatively competitive, but I think Vieira should win the fight. I think she's just a little bit better in most areas of fighting. And to capitalize on these odds, definitely go to mybookie.ag, where for your first deposit, they give you a sign-up bonus where they'll match that first deposit all the way up to $1,000. Whatever it is up to $1,000, they'll match it. So if you put like $50, they'll give you another $50 to play with. And to activate this, use the promo code WEASEL, that's WEASLE, to activate this offer. Remember to visit mybookie.ag today, where you can win big. And that's the end of the predictions, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to give this some thumbs up. If you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe. My podcast is being worked on, and I do have that Alex Pereira breakdown. It's more specifically on what is contributing to his power. I'm very excited about working on that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.